Good morning, everybody. Right. For those who don't know me, my name's James Baggett. I'm the founder of Car Magazine. Welcome to CDX. Thanks for coming along. For this panel, we've got some fantastic people. So this is about best practice online, making the most of your digital shop window. So the internet is changing the way our businesses are run. It's changing the way that we communicate and the way that we shop. This means your online branding is now more important than ever before. So our next panel is going to be discussing exactly how you can make the most of your virtual shop window. So please put your hands together and welcome my guests to the stage. Yeah, please. Okay, quick introductions. On my left, we have Paul Bradley. He's a recruitment manager at Group 1 Automotive, correct?
Good morning, all.
We've got Catherine Faiers, who joined Auto Trader last year as audience and brand director.
Morning, everyone.
Then there's Jimi Matthews, who is director of business development at recruitment agency Perfect Placement.
Good morning.
And finally, Max Stolton, who is the industry manager at Google, who's spent his career working in digital marketing.
Good morning, everybody.
So, welcome along. Thank you very much. First question. How do you think dealers can create a brand that sticks in the mind of consumers these days? Who wants to kick us off?
Shall I go first? Excellent. Straight in there, right at the deep end. That's a quite tough question, purely because so many factors go into building a brand. When you think of brand advertising, you think of, okay, well, what is my tagline? What is my messaging? What am I bringing to my consumers? But really, building a brand is about building upon the experience that you bring to your consumers. And there's a lot of platforms that allow you to do that. But really, you've got to think about, what am I saying to my customers? What am I providing my customers that's going to be a unique experience for them, and how I'm creating a better journey for them? Then you need to communicate that in the most effective way. And that will vary depending on where they are in their customer journey. So if they're at the stage where they're trying to understand, what do I want to buy? So when someone typically comes into market for a car, for example, they will have very little idea usually around what they're actually looking to buy. So typically people will consider about 4 to 5 cars. They'll then whittle it down to 2.8 cars. Your role in that space is to communicate, well, why should I be here at this time? What is it that I'm bringing to the consumer while they're trying to whittle down their choices? They then know what they want. They know their make, they know their model. They're starting to think about finance. They're starting to think about why they're going to purchase this car and where they're going to purchase it from. Again, your brand needs to be there as long as it has a right to be there, and you've got the right information, the right content on your website, and you have a proposition which is compelling for that user. You need to make sure that you're surfacing that information at that moment of need at the right time. And as I said, there's numerous platforms that allow you to do that. So within Google's ecosystem, YouTube is a wonderful place to be able to put your brand out in front of your consumers as they are kind of making that research and that kind of purchase consideration, I guess. And then going through into AdWords, the tone and the messaging of your text ads are really important to building a brand online. You can't just plaster the same message across everyone and expect it to resonate with them. So you've really got to think about, why am I communicating with my user? What is the value proposition I'm adding? And where should I be advertising to them at that time?
So, Catherine, on an Auto Trader side of things, how important is a dealer's brand on your platform when there's purely lots of lists of cars? Is the brand still as important?
Yeah, absolutely. I think brand's more important today than it ever has been. We know that 90% of users touch digital channels when they're going through that car buying journey. And consumers are more confused today than they ever have been at any point. So consistency of brand, both for Auto Trader but also for dealers, has never been more important. We think about that from 2 angles. We think about, firstly, the journey that consumers are going through and the value of the brand proposition for dealers. And that's about making sure that with now the fragmentation of touch points online, that you're there in as many of them as you possibly can be. Actually, we think fragmentation creates an opportunity for dealers, because never before have consumers been more confused and offered more choice. Therefore, the more you can be front and centre, the better opportunity for dealers. Secondly, we see, I guess, the full funnel of transaction data for consumers online. So we see right the way through from search, typically through to when the purchase is delivered. And the consumer value proposition in each of those stages is really important. So the job for the dealer is really to make sure that consumers are getting the right information, so they've got the right images, the right videos, the right content on site, that they're delivering the best customer service they possibly can. So we see an Auto Trader, most consumers are actually on our platform between 7 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night, when most dealers are shut. So having interactive chat and other features on the platform is really, really important. And also customer service in terms of dealer reviews. So dealers that have incorporated reviews into their platforms typically sell cars about 4 days quicker than dealers that don't. So it's an obvious quick win. Also, beyond information and service, it's about price and choice. So pricing to market from day one, we know that dealers that price to market from the beginning sell cars a lot quicker than dealers that don't, and they typically end up delivering a better price through the end transaction. We also have a lot of data that suggests that buying the right stock and knowing what cars in your areas really resonate with consumers is really important. So having the right data and tools to hand is key to building the right brand experience as well.
Thank you. Jimmy, any practical tips for dealers looking to create or enhance their brand online? You've obviously got quite a strong one that shall stand over there.
Yeah, I think that the main thing is, as both these guys have said, is to try and work out what the message is you're trying to get across. Because your message online needs to be seriously replicated by what you offer when someone does actually eventually come into your business. If the two don't marry up, then, I mean, we see this more importantly when we start talking about recruitment, where a business will have an HR manager or a hiring manager talk the interviewee through the process, but prior to them getting there, and the culture and the environment of the business and the training and career opportunities, but the digital platforms don't mention that at all. So there's no synergy between both the physicality of the business and the digital platforms on which you're talking about yourself as either a customer engager or an employee engager as to what you offer. The two have to marry up, otherwise you're on a hiding to nothing.
Paul, if you were going to make one change to a business to increase its brand online, what would it be and how would you do it?
Wow, that is loud. In the current market, and certainly in my experience, that would be capitalising on the social media space. There are far too many users that are existing in that space at the moment, and not enough of, let's say, certainly in our industry, and maybe in the wider world, that capitalise by putting their message and the core values of their business, their culture, why buy from us, why are we better than the competition? It's not price, it's who we are. People by people. It's within that social media space where I would spend my money.
Max, is brand really important for dealers? Do customers care?
I believe they do.
Yes.
I think brand is incredibly important. I mean, very few of us here would have a relationship with businesses that didn't have a brand or you had an affinity towards them. And I think building your dealership's brand and making sure that you are there with your consumers is really important. So I think we touched on it earlier, but the consideration time for a car is incredibly long. You're talking for new car purchases between 2 to 3 months. If you are not there throughout that process, someone else will be, and someone else will be talking to your customers and taking those customers from you. So you need to make sure that your brand is there and it's important, but it's playing in the right space, like I mentioned earlier. You need to be adding value, and you need to be really clearly communicating what your core proposition is when that user is 2 months down the line versus 1 month down the line versus ready to step foot in your forecourt. So brand is incredibly important, and I think that is not going to change anytime soon.
So Catherine, if you were to give a top tip about increasing and improving brand to dealers here that they're going to take home and implement tomorrow, what would that be?
It would definitely be focused on the experience that they deliver when consumers arrive at their platforms. So data and the use of data in the industry is probably the biggest opportunity to reinforce brand values, because 2/3 of consumers enter the journey not knowing the car that they're going to buy, open to new, used, open to different brands. It's a really complicated decision-making process, and actually our business and many other businesses out there have data that dealers can use to make that journey much more powerful and much easier for the consumer. So we need to take that complexity and simplify it for consumers and be presenting clear, consistent messages and guiding them through that journey at every step of the process.
Is it possible to keep the same brand running across all the different platforms? Obviously, there are other competitors to Auto Trader out there. Do you think that's important for dealers to make sure that they keep that branding consistent?
Their own branding, certainly, and I think we have been fortunate enough to benefit from huge economies of scale from the work that we've done over 40 odd years of building our brand. That means that trust and transparency we've created over years does really play to consumers. So for both dealers and for us, having that really core simplicity of message has got to be at the heart of what all of our businesses strive to do.
So to all of you really, what do you think the biggest mistake is that dealers currently make when it comes to branding?
Consistency of message, without a shadow of a doubt, and taking the step back is not just the consistency of the message and how that's received from the customer, the candidate, certainly from Jimmy and my point of view, which is the recruitment and retention of staff, but is the business aware of what its brand is, of then how that translates into its culture and what those core pillars mean. Group 1 Automotive, I mean, we have our core values. If I can I stand in with complete confidence and say that every single dealer understands what those core cultural messages mean, and then how that translates into the brand? If they don't, do the customers? And then what does that translate to?
Yeah, I'd say it's consistency of message, but we have brand messages. Most businesses have brand messages or value they stand for. It's really in the consistent delivery of it that we see most examples where people aren't actually reinforcing either through the stock strategy they're deploying or the pricing strategy they're deploying or how they're using data. It's too easy to compromise on those values when you get into the day-to-day process of actually doing business. So I'd say rigorous kind of adherence to and focus on delivering those values day in, day out is the most important factor.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If you're going to try something new, be it a new Instagram campaign or a Twitter campaign, then that message needs to be transferred across all the other social media platforms, including your own website, because people will come to your brand via different methods, different platforms, and if they start seeing a confused message where something new or innovative is being tried on one platform and not being replicated across the others, then you could lose any power that you had in any innovation you made because there's no synergy across all the platforms. And more often than not, if anyone does make a mistake, it's that they think, well, I'll try it on a smaller platform and see how it goes before I release it across all. Well, your customers are seeing you on all of the platforms, and if they start seeing it on a new campaign or an innovative campaign or something that's completely off-brand as a trial on something else, are they going to think that's a new customer? Are they going to think that's a new business? Or are they going to think that's you?
Yeah, I'd just like to build upon that because I agree with all of those points. I think that's really important. But we're living in an age today where we're generating a huge amount of data about the people coming to our websites. They're showing high signals of intent. The biggest mistake that I see dealerships making is treating everybody exactly the same. Putting the same messaging out, saying whether it's a new, a used car, whether it's a female, male, parent, not a parent, treating their need as exactly the same and pushing a strong sales promotion rather than actually capturing some of the emotive value that is there. So when we look at the data and we look at the kind of demographics of users that come through to our dealership clients, we then say, okay, well, we know that maybe 22% of your audience looks like a female parent who's recently had a child and lives within a certain kind of socio-economic grouping. And we'd say, well, how would you communicate to that person versus the single male who works in the city and wants to buy the flashiest, fastest car he can get? You need a consistent brand tone of voice, so you need to clearly communicate your values as a brand, but you need to adapt your messaging and your strategies to really communicate to the people as they want to be communicated to. What problem am I solving for that person? And I think that's really important. It's something we fall foul of a little bit when we think about copy testing. We go, okay, well, I'm going to try this promotional message versus this promotional message. And we forget about the people that sit behind it and actually engaging and communicate it, or engaging with your brands and your websites and coming into your dealerships.
So I'm going to put you all on the spot a little bit more than you are already. Who do you think is doing it really well when it comes to branding in the manufacturer world and also the dealer world? specific examples?
Who's going to take the plunge?
I actually think these guys sat next to us here, Carwow, are doing a great job of using YouTube as a platform to communicate, as I said before, kind of key and critical information about vehicles and information that's useful to the consumer while at the same time building their brand up. And they're using that platform and the kind of leaned-in audience that they have to really put their brand front and center. And they do that in a really strong and consistent manner. And I think you can learn a lot about kind of YouTube strategy based on the way in which they're advertising at the moment.
Jimmy?
I'm going to look at this from a different point of view, because obviously I'm looking at, from a recruitment point of view, or from a candidate attraction point of view, or an employee engagement point of view, who is actually engaging with potential new employees or their own current staff on their digital platforms. There are many that are using Twitter and their own, and Facebook and their own websites to engage with potential new employees and even their own staff. But I don't think anyone's doing it outstandingly, because I think everyone is, quite rightly, interested in their customer attraction. The question I would pose is, if you're spending all of your time, effort and energy on attracting new customer base and nothing in terms of employee retention, employee engagement and candidate new blood, new talent, who's going to be there to serve your customers when your attraction process actually works and you start getting an influx of new customers? You need your talent there to solve them at the other end. I think that if anyone was to look at their page, their careers page and their work for us pages just tend to be what we're looking for currently, rather than testimonials from current employees, testimonials from existing staff who have been with the business for a while, day in the life stories. I think there's so much more that could be done to tell your current staff what you're like as an employer and to engage them to use it as an attraction tool.
So who's doing that well at the moment?
I deliberately swerved that question because I don't think that there's anyone that's doing it enough and consistently enough. If I was to pick out one dealer group that we do see a lot on Twitter, and I'd make a suggestion to them, obviously, you know, we see everyone's Twitter action, and I think the biggest thing I see quite a lot is, for example, Marshall Motor Group use Twitter to do their campaigns where a new customer comes in and takes their car off them. I see that quite a lot. But I see it from the company Twitter account rather than the employee Twitter account. So the employee's been lost in the motion. The customer is gained in the motion, the business is gained in the motion, but the employee is almost superfluous to the transaction. And I think that if you're looking at it as platform or digital platforms as a employee engagement tool, then potentially the employee could be doing that Twitter post themselves and it just being backed up by the employer.
Yeah, jumping in on that, because, yeah, I would have said Marshall's Drive Vauxhall do it very, very, very well. There's a consistent sort of message out there from a candidate point of view. My role being brought into Group 1 is to look at all of that digital space and how we do it from a candidate attraction point. So obviously, you look at who's doing it right out there and learn from the betters. So yeah, definitely Marshalls. But to have it come from the employee point of view, the control that would have to be placed behind that, the copyright, to insist on that message that goes out is always correct, brand-centric, appropriate. Could be a little bit more difficult to juggle.
There's a certain element of trust involved in it, certainly.
Trust.
But I think if you are picking your employees correctly, and more importantly, engaging them on the message and the brand, and this is where brand and message are slightly different. You talked about message being consistent or being targeted. That's different to brand. Brand is about who you are and what your core values are. If you've got the right people involved that believe wholeheartedly in your core values and that are upstanding in those pillars of what's holding your business together, then actually maintaining what they're putting out there digitally shouldn't be that much of a difficult task.
Catherine, any brands that you see in your daily work life who are doing things brilliantly?
We've been really excited actually recently by some of the conversations we've been having with the manufacturers about changing their brand perceptions. So most of the industry still forgets that women are responsible or behind many car purchases. They might not always be the front of the car purchase, but they certainly have influence. And we've been running a series of video reviews focused around women and the car buying journey that women go through. And we've been really, really surprised by the level of engagement, involvement, and money that some of the manufacturers are now prepared to put behind building and changing their brand perception over time to really try and engage with women with relevant content in a meaningful way that's right for them, and not just focus necessarily on selling the latest model based on performance features or functionality that traditionally has been, I guess, some of the major approach that the big brands have taken to building a brand in this space.
So how do dealers make sure that these messages that they start online continue when customers walk into their dealerships? Max?
Shall I begin? It's a very good question. I think it comes back down to that consistency and what you're communicating online and the proposition that you're putting front and center of your customers to get them into your forecourts and into your dealerships. You need to consistently bring that tone through to the face-to-face experience, and that's where the cars are actually sold. So, you know, your brand, I think you touched on it a moment ago, is your kind of values. It's what you're communicating, and you build a perception of a brand from the first interaction online, so the first time you see a banner ad, you see the first time you see their YouTube activity, through to the first person who greets you in the dealership and the smile you get and the service and the approachability that comes with the kind of face-to-face experience. So I think it just needs to filter throughout the organization, and what is being communicated digitally needs to represent what you're doing in the physical world as well. The two are interconnected in a way which is not going to change, and digital is only going to become more important in the physical world. So as long as you are consistent in your values and what you're bringing forward and your messaging, then that is how you will start to win in that world.
Yeah, I think you need to make sure that your staff, because they're the physical aspect that are going to be in control of your brand when the customer comes in, you need to sort of engage with your staff so that they're involved in your social media platforms as well. They know what's on your website, but do they know what your Facebook page is saying? Do they know what your Twitter account is saying? Do they know what your LinkedIn account is saying? Do they know what your Instagram account is saying? Because if they don't, then how can they possibly be expected to embody what brand you're putting out there when the customer finally comes in? And I think that's where it comes to embodying the brand.
And from jumping off of the back of that is the day one when, the employee, because that's certainly the space that I exist in, the induction process. Do we bring the individuals into the business? Do we give them enough of an understanding of who are we, what do we stand for, what does that look like, what is the message that we then take to the customer when they walk into our dealerships? Do we do enough on that induction process to enable that employee to continually give that consistency that we're all talking about?
Catherine, a final word on this?
Yes, I would say hire the right people and induct them in the right way into the business, but then give them the right data and toolkit to be successful, and make sure that they've got the data and the tools they need that reflect your brand values and enable them to execute that successfully, because that's the only real way to get consistency of message through everything that you do, from buying the right cars to selling them at the right price to making sure you're marketing them in the right way.
Okay, that's about all we've got time for. Next up on the live stage in about 5 minutes, we're going to be talking digital car sales and whether consumers really want to buy online. So please put your hands together for my panellists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.